Welcome, I'm Nina Griffin and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today we'll talk about the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction of 2022 in Pisces. First off, thank you so much to all of my patrons. I appreciate all of your support. If you would like to get access to Astrology and Magic videos early, as well as access to Astrology and Magic content that's not available to the general public, you can visit patreon.com/Nina Griffin. If you are a patron at the highest tier, you can also get my monthly magical elections document, which teaches you how and when to make planetary astrological talismans. All right, now let's get started. First, let's talk a little bit about Jupiter in Pisces. This is a combination that's very spiritual, mystical, and romantic. As I've mentioned previously, it can create major rose-colored glasses, even though people are not really viewing fact as they are. It tends to be a year that religious and spiritual and humanitarian movements thrive, and the best manifestation of all of this is a focus on universal personhood and compassion. The worst manifestation is cultish behavior and theocratic oppression. Now, Jupiter conjoining Neptune happens every 13 years. However, it takes a very long time for it to happen in the same sign due to the fact that Neptune has a very long cycle to go through the zodiac. So the last time that Jupiter conjoined Neptune in Pisces was actually in 1856, which we will discuss at length in a moment. So this actually happened 164 years ago. Now, this year, this conjunction is in orb since early March. We get it April 12th at 24 Pisces. And if we use the traditional 9-degree orb for Jupiter, it means that since about early March, Jupiter and Neptune were conjoined. They will remain in orb until the second week of May, when Jupiter leaves Pisces for Aries. Now, Venus also participates in this aspect this year as she transits Pisces, making this combination very benefic and healing, which isn't, of course, always the case. Among planetary aspects, strictly speaking, I think that Jupiter conjoining Neptune is the most important aspect in 2022. It impacts the collective because it involves a superior planet, Jupiter, and an outer planet, Neptune. And if you saw my Patreon video about the equities and other markets in 2022, this is from December 2021, by the way, this combination is extremely important for the markets. Politically, this combination augurs a phase focused on benefiting large numbers of people. It's very generous, idealistic, and seeks to uplift people. It's been linked to financial rescue packages or even larger movements and the like, as we saw in 2009 when Jupiter conjoined Neptune in Aquarius. Now, André Barbeau was a famous French mundane astrologer who passed away a few years ago, and his study of Jupiter conjunct Neptune is quite extensive. He called this combination, and I quote, generally humid, temperate, and diffuse, emphasizing the Neptunian current of unified collective global power, end quote. And I think it's important to recognize the unified collective global power aspect of this combination, because this is something that is a movement that involves a very large number of people around the world. So it's not even something that would just impact perhaps one nation or one type of group. There is a certain universality to it. Now, Barbeau then goes on to describe this combination as symbolizing universal moral values, unity, peaceful exchange, humanitarian values, and importantly, diplomatic and political détente, as well as collective movements of all sorts. Now, Barbeau is the one who cites 1856 as the last time that Jupiter conjoined Neptune in Pisces. Specifically, this happened March 17th, 1856. The combination was not a triple conjunction, just a single time. So let's talk about 1856 and see if we can extrapolate something from that year to 2022. So 1856 saw the end of the Crimean War. Now, the end of the Crimean War happened via the famous Treaty of Paris that was signed March 30th, 1856, 2 weeks after Jupiter conjoined Neptune at 18 degrees Pisces. Now, the Crimean War involved an alliance of England, France, Turkey, and Sardinia, who fought Russia for control of Crimea, and the alliance prevailed. Now, it took 2.5 years of fighting, but Russia's army was decimated, suffering multiples of casualties compared to their opponents. Their economy was in tatters, and Russian elites, as a result, realized that major reform was needed in Russia to stay relevant as a European power. As a result of the Treaty of Paris, Russia had to give up important territory in Crimea and elsewhere. Later on, about 5 years later, the realizations that Russia had as a result of this bad end of the war for them led to the emancipation of the serfs. The other interesting thing about this war was that it's considered the first modern technological conflict because it used mass-produced weaponry from factories, and they also used telegraph lines and railroads in a significant way. Now, it is generally agreed that all parties did a terrible job with logistics, and so there was a lot of unnecessary death and suffering, particularly death from disease that could have been avoided with better logistical preparations and arrangements. So we can certainly see some similarities between the conflict that, for example, Russia started in Ukraine and what we see in 1856. Now, it could be that in 2022, history repeats and Russia is forced to withdraw due to major losses. 2022 has the better configuration compared to 1856 because Venus is in Pisces along with Jupiter and Neptune in April, and then there's a powerful and, in my opinion, quite positive solar eclipse highlighting Venus conjoining Jupiter and Neptune. For comparison, in 1856, Saturn in Gemini was squaring Jupiter and Neptune, showing, I think, the terrible 2.5-year war that had preceded the Treaty of Paris. My hope is that 2022 offers a quicker conclusion than a multi-year war. Now, 2022 is not without its problems due to the separating conjunction of Mars and Saturn that happened just prior to Jupiter-Neptune conjoining, so I think that there are still atrocities to come before a resolution is possible. This video is being filmed at the end of March, so the Mars-Saturn conjunction is still applying. I think it's important to realize that, of course, history doesn't repeat, but it often does rhyme. And I think especially aspects like Jupiter conjoining Neptune, which only happen once every 13 years, are very potent because of their rarity. That is, of course, a major rule of astrology, that the rarer a particular combination is or an aspect or event, the more powerful it is in impacting life on Earth. I think that Jupiter conjunct Neptune is going to leave a major mark on 2022, certainly the first half of the year, but I also think that it's going to reflect some of the big changes that are going to be happening in Russia and in the former Soviet republics in the coming years, culminating in the middle of this decade. All right, thanks for watching. I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel.